Hi everyone, so I've now put together the first of my 4Ground Old West buildings, pre-painted buildings. So this is the assembled kit, straight as it comes out of the packet. I haven't endeavoured to make any modifications to it, to put any more paint on it than it's got already. Basically, I just wanted to do the sort of bare minimum to get a building together and see what it looked like, and I'll think about with future buildings about what else to do with them. But as I say, just wanted to get this done, not as quickly as possible, but as basically as possible, to show you the essentially what you get out of the packet. And I'm really very happy with it indeed. I wanted to go through a few things just to review my kind of experience of putting it together and so on, and talk about it a little bit. Yeah, I'm not a massively expert modeler or kit builder. Probably the reverse. I'm quite bad at it, and this one is, they all have various difficulty levels, and this is a level 4 difficulty, and I think, I wouldn't like to say for sure, but there's definitely a level 6 building that I've got. The larger buildings, like the livery stations and so on, tend to be level 6. This is a fairly small building as they come, and this one is level 4. And I didn't find it too hard. It was there was some mistakes that I did make, but they weren't so much mistakes as accidents, you could say. One of them in particular is that it does say that you need, they recommend a sharp modelling knife to ease the parts from the sprues. Remember to cut away from your body and fingers, it's got in brackets. Now, I found, if I can get you one of the yeah, so here's one of the sprues that still has some parts attached. I'll talk about that in a moment. But you can see there are some window shutters there that I haven't taken off the sprue, and that's because they don't actually feature in the instructions, and they don't appear on any of the images of the completed model. So I'm thinking they're just there as an additional option if you wanted to shutter the windows, maybe. Anyway, yeah, I'll come back to that in a moment. Anyway, but if you do use a knife such as this, or a scalpel, I mean, it implies sort of cut away from yourself as though you're going to make that kind of action. I wouldn't recommend that, especially on the outer surface of the part you're trying to detach. If you're going to do that kind of action, do it on that side, because it does slip. The knife will slip very easily. I mean, admittedly, I've lost the tiny bit off the point of my scalpel. That might have been part of the cause of it. But when I was cutting quite a long piece, it did slide and slightly scratch across that surface there, but you would hardly notice it. But what I found was it's much better working on the kind of side that's not going to appear on the outside of the model, and to do your best to sort of push the piece out, see how easily it will detach anyway. But then areas that are resistant, just put the knife in and give it a very kind of gentle nudge rather than a a sliding action, and you'll find that they come out very easily. So yeah, so that was one of the things I would recommend. Another was that on the paper, you basically you get a paper sign, and that comes with a lot of here it is. So that's the area that I cut the sign out from, but you can see you also get a whole pre-printed sheet of posters and so on. So if you wanted to, you could cut those out, some of those out. They're basically the typical kind of Old West sort of posters, you know, wanted dead or alive, and there's adverts for the Pony Express, all that kind of thing. So you can really, I didn't want to, as I say, I wanted just to do the basic model, but you could paste posters up on there as well. But anyway, I did manage, because it's a slightly this isn't a rectangle. It's got a a kind of like an angular shape to it as well, and I did manage even with the scalpel and a straight ruler to slightly tear that corner there. So I just dabbed a little bit of black paint on it to hide where it had exposed the kind of white paper. So they were two of my they were the only two accidents that I had due to my own inept kit building skills. And I found the instructions reasonably easy to follow. One of the things that is slightly kind of deceptive about this is that this piece of boardwalk is actually separate. You don't realise that looking at the picture, but I think all in all, if you're looking at that, you would imagine it's part of the same model. But I think that probably is a reasonably wise thing to have. There's around the corner here, there's another piece of boardwalk, and this is actually glued to the model, and I wouldn't trust, because it's, even though it's a small model, it's reasonably heavy. I wouldn't attempt to lift the entire model up just with your fingers on that corner. It could put strain on it, and it could become detached, I suppose. And then on the subject of what comes detached, the roof obviously isn't glued on. They also say not to glue this canopy or this on. This I can understand because you may want to take that off. I'm not going to at any point, because you can reach inside, put figures inside, through there. So I might glue that on, I don't know. But they are fairly firmly kind of pressed down, so they're not likely to come off anyway. But yeah, going back to that business of working from using your knife to work from the rear, from the back of the pieces, so that you don't damage them with the knife. I found with these black surfaces, if you've got them face down on a surface to work on the back, I don't know if you can see, but they are a little bit kind of, probably won't show up on the camera, but there are a few kind of areas that are a little bit scuffed, and that's because I tend to work on a wooden surface that's a little bit kind of gritty. So there is a danger that you can damage that if you're not careful, and I hadn't realised that until it was too late. So be aware that you can scuff that kind of surface, and I would imagine equally with the red pre-painted surface that you might be able to do it with that. So you have to take a little bit of care and caution. And something that a good tip that Palmer passed on. Palmer from Heresy Productions passed on to me is if you are handling the pieces and you've got glue on your fingers, or PVA glue, then try your best not to touch any of the painted surfaces, because that can mess up the paint as well. It will show up after it's dried. But I think I got away with that. Yeah, managed to get all the working parts working, the doors and so on. Isn't it? There are 3 doors. The windows don't open or shut. But as I say, I was puzzled by those shutters. On the instructions, they don't appear at all. So I think they are there just as an additional option. And there are an awful lot of cut-offs and things like that. I mean, I won't show it all to you. But I've got masses and masses of pieces that are just redundant. Really, they're the parts that held windowsills and beams and so on. But I'm going to hang on to all these. There's another shutter here I've just noticed. So examples like that, you see. So you could have the windows completely boarded up, but I'm going to hang on to all this because it looks useful. I might even be able to make tables and things like that, bits of furniture, because the interiors are really nicely, sort of walled and so on. So they look perfectly. They're not kind of like blank walls and blank floors and so on. So it's going to be easy to put scatter terrain and so on down in those. I mean, I was thinking about, if you remember, I've recently purchased, haven't got them painted up yet, some oriental rugs, these kind of things. Now, in a hardware store, they're not going to be very appropriate, but when I come to do the hotels and so on, not even the saloon, maybe, you don't want a saloon down on a floor that cowboys are going to be spitting on and so on, but something like that on the floor of these buildings is going to be good. And I have found another company. I won't mention them at the moment. I've sent off for some of their products and I'll do a review of them when they arrive. But it's kind of scatter terrain that you can put in Old West buildings, things like tables and chairs and a piano, things like that. But I'll go into that in more depth later. As a comparison with other suppliers of Old West buildings as well, I would rate 4Ground very highly. This is the first 4Ground building I've ever put together. I've got some MDF buildings. I think they're all from Sarissa, if I remember correctly. I've got like an Old West hacienda building and some Oriental buildings for games, samurai games. Although I don't dislike the Sarissa, in general I don't like MDF buildings, partly because of this kind of, I don't know if you can even see, but where you have the little sockets and so on, it often doesn't look quite right to me. But with this sort of fairly kind of crudely constructed Old West type of building, it doesn't look too out of place. But with the Sarissa buildings, they were all right, but I wasn't entirely happy with the result, and I certainly wasn't happy with the way that I painted them up. So 4Ground, solved that problem basically by having pre-painted parts that give the models a little bit of colour. So they're definitely improvement on that. I feel that this is a really kind of high quality kit. It's expensive, but you get a much better quality kit. There's sort of internal and external parts, so which gives it more solidity, but also more attractive appearance when you take the roof off and so on. Everything. I was really kind of enjoying the way the shapes sort of went together as a almost like a kind of jigsaw puzzle. It was very cleverly designed to allow lots of kind of joints and so on, but to hide them all once the final kind of panels and pieces have been put on. That goes for things like the windows have got kind of internal and external aspects and so on. So they don't scrimp on material, and the design was very, very cleverly done. So I think that if you're not worried about the expense, then I would say this is the way to go. I did notice another, apart from Sarissa, whose models aren't painted. I did notice another company called Empires at War who do pre-painted Old West buildings, and they're a lot cheaper. But I might try them out. Get one of those to see what it's like. But I suspect probably the money on those is saved by maybe having less internal detail, or having slightly thinner MDF. I don't know. Be interesting to check that out in the future. And Sarissa's buildings, in terms of painting them, Adrian's Walls do offer a service where they will construct and paint up Sarissa buildings for you, and they look very nice indeed, but they certainly work out more expensive than buying these models direct from 4Ground that you don't have to paint up. So you got sort of like a whole spectrum of options out there, going from the relatively cheap pre-painted buildings from Empires at War through these ones up to the Sarissa stroke Adrian's Walls option to choose from. But as I say, yeah, really happy with this, and I'll crack on with the next building now. And I think as soon as I switch the camera off, I'm going to remember. Oh yeah, that is one last thing. As an example of what you might get in terms of additional quality and nice touches, is that another thing with the MDF buildings is that they do tend to have very kind of rectilinear properties. But I don't know if you notice, but with things like the edge of the planking here and all the edges on this, they've been laser cut so that they do look uneven, even down to having angles going that way. So it's not just that they're jagged, they're also kind of slightly crooked. So it does give it far more of a kind of carpentered, sawn off kind of end to all those planks in the boardwalk. So that's the kind of additional quality kind of touches you get for your money. And I'm sort of pleased with it. Boardwalks as well, just finally, just say, Empires at War do a little kit, which I don't think 4Ground do, maybe I'm wrong, where you just get a whole load of boardwalk sections so that you can put them adjacent to your own buildings and so on. I thought that was quite nice. Anyway, that's it. On to the next building, and thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.